The point of the video today is an over explanation of the difference between the Mark 16 and the Mark 17 in Ready or Not, with a little bit of background story to it just because I thought it was interesting / it's kind of convoluted. The SCAR, also known as the Special Operations Forces Combat Assault Rifle, look it up, that's actually its name. I didn't know that until I started researching this. Also known as the Tactical UGG Boot for its iconic folding stock, is manufactured at FN Manufacturing LLC plant in Columbia, South Carolina. A very original name. But to get into a little bit more of the lore, in 2004, US SOCOM had issued a solicitation for a new combat rifle. FN originally designed a weapon system around the 5.56 and 7.62 cartridges. The intent was to replace current inventories of M4s within the armed forces. So the largest advantage over traditional rifles is the short gas piston, allowing for a folding stock design that you see on the SCAR, and then in turn this allows for greater maneuverability and storage compared to other rifles of similar calibers. During the same year, the EGLM, the Enhanced Grenade Launcher Module, which was based originally on FN's GL1, intended for use on the FN 2000, I'll throw up some pictures just to clarify what I'm talking about, was unique in that it had a swing out chamber that you could swing either left and or right, compared to other traditional grenade launchers, which from my understanding either lock left and or lock right. You can't have it ambidextrous. What also made this system unique was its ability to use multiple types of ammunition as well as longer 40mm rounds. So before we dive further into its history, I kind of wanted to do this flowchart because it gets somewhat confusing, and I apologize. I will try my best to either reference it as a SCAR H and or SCAR L, the Mark 17, which is a SCAR H, and the Mark 16, which is the SCAR L. But here is my beautiful artwork flowchart to preface. This does not cover every single make and model of the SCAR, so bear with me. Again, this is an oversimplification and or certain models that I had found interesting. To break it down, simply put, you either have the 7.62 variant or the 5.56 variant. So for the 7.62 variants, or the SCAR H variants, you would have the SCAR 17S, which is a standard civilian version chambered in 7.62 by 51. Moving over, you have the Mark 17, which is a standard military version chambered in 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor. And then for you snipers out there, there is the Mark 20 SSR, which is based on the SCAR H and is built to be a DMR within the military and is semi-auto only. There are other smaller adjustments to that, but oversimplification. And then you have the SCAR 20S, which is a civilian version of the Mark 20 chambered in 308 6.5 Creedmoor. Moving over to the right side, the SCAR L. I included these just because I thought they were interesting. I was not aware of this. So you have the SCAR FNAC, which was a prototype built for limited competition, offering a weight reduction, bayonet lug, rail-mounted folding iron sights, and a non-reciprocating charging handle. From my understanding, the intent of this one was to replace all M4s across the force. And then you have the SCAR Hammer, which was a prototype developed for Marine Corps infantry automatic rifle competition. It had a innovative automatic temperature-based operation modes, which from my understanding switched it from closed to open bolt firing, depending on the temperature itself. From what I read, I couldn't really find a lot about it. It just helps with reliability. Moving down, you have the SCAR MK16, which is the 15P, which is a civilian version, semi-automatic fire only, chambered in 5.56 or 300 blackout, and if I recall, 7.5-inch barrel. And then you have the 16S, which is a standard civilian version, chambered in 5.56 by 45. The important takeaway here is SCAR H is your Mark 17 in Ready or Not, and then the SCAR L is your Mark 16 in Ready or Not. To further get into the lore of the SCAR, it had finished limited testing production in 2007. It had finally been deployed with the 75th Ranger Battalion in Afghanistan with roughly 600 rifles issued. This was significant because it was the first major in-theater combat test of the weapon system, and then later the SCAR L was cancelled by US SOCOM. It had decided to only keep the SCAR H, buying conversion kits so they could switch between 308 and 5.56 for it. US SOCOM had claimed the reasoning being that the price wasn't really justifiable because the advantages the SCAR L offered, or they were marginally better than what the M4 had at a significantly lower price, as well as issues with procurement, spare parts, obviously training on a new weapon system and completely changing and training the institutional knowledge around a new weapon system. Again, all in the name for slightly better performance. It wasn't justifiable. Another little tidbit I'd found interesting, couldn't get any details on it. I think I'd read it on Reddit, but there are claims that some Ukrainian special forces are using them in the current conflict in Ukraine with Russia. But to get into the pros and cons of the weapons system, the pros being is a gas piston system. I don't know if you know. Generally speaking, you have better reliability with that than your traditional AR. Again, from what I've read, it is relatively accurate compared to other rifles of similar caliber. It has interchangeable barrels and an overall modular design, allowing for extensive customization based upon mission requirements. And then parts are common between the SCAR L and SCAR H, so from my understanding, you can swap them to a degree back and forth. To get into issues, and there are a lot of them, from my understanding, some of these have been fixed and or changed over time so that you don't run into it. And there's aftermarket parts to fix a lot of these things. The biggest issue from what I'd read was the reciprocating charging handle. When you had fired, it would move back and forth with each shot, causing snag on something else and or strike the shooter's hand, which is also known as SCAR bite. Specifically with the SCAR H variant, it would cause damage to sights just because of the recoil of the round and the way the gun was designed, which I don't know if you know, not a good thing. Sights are very expensive for a good one, which you're going to be running if you have a SCAR. There was feeding issues with the SCAR L just because the increased magazine well size, 4 or 5.56 round. From my understanding, it would just jam it up and you'd have 2 or 3 rounds just stuck in there and you'd have to take apart the whole gun just to unjam it. Obviously kind of bad in a combat situation. There was overheating issues after firing a couple magazines, which, since the weapon was specifically designed for Special Forces use, from my understanding, standard procedure during engagements is laying down of suppressive fire, so obviously you can't have it heating up on you like that, especially within a couple magazines. The original stock was very fragile, and the button, like the folding button on it, would wear out over time, and from my understanding, it would just flap back and forth, you know? A higher cost procurement for a marginally better gun. And then in civilian markets, from my understanding, you can't replace magazines with any kind of generic, off the shelf. You had to buy specifically from FN because they just weren't compatible. And it's kind of interesting. Again, this is solely based on Reddit. From what I had read, the SCAR L isn't really worth the money for what you're paying. There are other alternatives. You could completely build in an AR for what you're going to pay for a stock SCAR, probably even with sights, arguably. People that own the SCAR H highly regarded it and loved it. From what they had said, it's worth the money. Just because there's so many variables, I went to FN's website and I looked up MSRP for these weapons, and depending on which model you get, it's going to cost you, high $3,000 to mid $4,000. Again, this price could vary depending on the retailer itself, just to give a general idea that this is not a cheap gun. To finally get into it, the Mark 16 and Mark 17 in Ready or Not, in my personal opinion. To put it simply, the Mark 16 is the SCAR L, which is the 5.56 variant, while the Mark 17 is the SCAR H, the 7.62 by 51 variant within Ready or Not. After playing a couple hours with both guns, and to clarify, I would swap the same attachments between both just to kind of get a feel, but I did play around with different attachments just to see if anything would change. These are my opinions on each. It seems like you may move slightly faster with the Mark 16, noticeably less recoil. I will give it that. It's a lot easier for follow-up shots if you miss, but strangely, and I can't explain why, I felt like I had a harder time aiming with it than what I did with the Mark 17. Now, with the Mark 17, depending on the ammo type, I had found that you could get 1 or 2 shot kills, and I really didn't notice a huge difference with the aim speed. I think a lot of that was more of the type of sight you had put on it. To be fair, I did notice slower movement with the gun. I didn't really notice any kind of difference on the barrel length, especially around corners and everything. It felt very similar. Although, depending on your skill level, I wouldn't choose this gun because the recoil on it is pretty bad, but that's just because you're shooting a 308. Overall, I would prefer the Mark 17, but if you have decent aim and or reflexes, I think the advantages of the Mark 17 heavily outweigh those of the Mark 16. And something else I had thought about that I really, again, after playing multiple games, multiple scenarios, I didn't have a problem with over-penetration and accidentally hitting hostages, which I don't know if that's a concern or not, depending on how you play the game. Again, if you place your shots correctly, I didn't really have a problem with it. I really like it. It's just nice that you can just pop an enemy really quick and be done. Move on. But now, the moment you all have been waiting for. During my research, I had found this little gem right here, making a new grenade launcher rifle. From my understanding, it's still in development and testing phase. I just thought it's cool. If you guys have ever played XCOM, it looks like the magnetic rifle from it a little bit. Do with that information as you will. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Let me know what you guys think. If you like the Mark 16 or Mark 17 better, or if you even use it at all, check out the channel. Posting more videos like this, it seems like it's more popular. Like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff, and I'll see you all next time.